This is section, what section is this? 4.1, part 2, right, for you 30s, is that correct? So 4.1, part 2, we're working with sample size here. And these questions are a little bit different than the questions we've had so far. They're basically an interpretation question. So you make an assessment or a judgment call on these. So let me just set it up for you. When performing an experiment to calculate experimental probability, you need to consider the sample size. That is, the total number of objects or events being counted. A very small sample size may not give results that are representative of the whole population. When the sample size is appropriate, the probability of the event of interest will be the same as the sample size as in the population as a whole. So, for example, if you want to know what grade 12 students all across the country feel about X, and you ask one person about X, you can't say, oh, because this person said there, that's my sample, and now I believe that everyone in the whole nation generally thinks this way. So you'd want to ask more than one person, right? You'd want to ask a wide selection of students in grade 12, right? Guys, girls, and interests, this and that, and all sorts of things. You want a good cross-section. So the more people you ask in a smaller sample, the closer that those results are probably going to be to the entire population. And when we take a sample like a survey or something, you're trying to get a feel for, or trying to get an idea of what everyone thinks, but you're only going to ask a smaller number of people. So it's impossible to find out, like for example, we just had a federal election just recently, right? So it's impossible to ask every person that's able to vote who they're thinking of voting for in order to create these polls and these polling numbers. So what they do is they phone a couple thousand people, and they say, well, what do these couple thousand people think? And that's probably a decent indication of what the whole country might think. Now, I don't know, is that right or not? The more people they ask, the better idea they have. So let's take a look at the example. A large cafeteria that serves lunch to more than 400 people per day offers 4 main dishes: spaghetti, hamburger, chicken, chow mein, vegetarian dish. Of the first 10 people through the line, no one chose the vegetarian dish. The manager decided to remove vegetarian dishes from the menu in the future. Is this a good decision? Explain your answer. So, I mean, you guys may have an idea. You may say, well, yeah, 10 out of 100 or 400. Okay, that's not too bad. And no one ate vegetarian dish, so yeah, let's take it off the menu. What does the solution say, or what other things can we consider here? Let me zoom in here. So this is not a good decision, says the textbook solution here, because there are likely to be some vegetarians who want to eat in the cafeteria but are not at the front of the line. The sample size of 10 people is very small compared to the population of 400. Rather than eliminating the vegetarian dish altogether, the manager should keep track of how many of each dish are sold and plan the amounts accordingly. So some of the things you want to consider are, it's not always the first people that are in line or the first people you talk to. They're not the most important. And especially if it's a self-selecting survey, like if you ever heard of these surveys on the radio or TV or something like that, where they say, online, vote online, right? Well, you're going to have people you may have certain types of people that answer those surveys. Maybe people that are not at work that day, or people that are really passionate about the subject, or you know what I mean? You may have a large group of a certain demographic in the population. So when it's self-selecting, you got to be kind of careful there too. When you're making phone calls, you have to think, okay, who am I not reaching by doing this? You're not reaching the people that don't have a phone. You're not reaching the people that have unlisted numbers, right? You're not maybe reaching, if you're only doing cell phone numbers or whatever, you're not reaching older or younger people, right? Let's say, for example. So when you make these decisions, you have to think, now, what's a good percentage? Well, that's a good question, right? I mean, the higher the percentage, the better. Now, this one said that 10 out of 400 is not real good. So what's that? 10 out of 400 is like what? 2.5%, something like that. So it's pretty small. It's pretty small. Maybe 10% would have been better, right? Maybe that's a better number. Maybe 40 people out of 400. If you ask that's 10%. So, okay. All right. So let's do this question together, just so we can kind of get a feel for it. So, Katja lives in Vancouver, BC. She conducted a survey in her math class and found that 29 out of the 30 students had brown eyes. She concluded that approximately 97% of the population of Canada has brown eyes. Is this a logical conclusion? Explain your answer. Okay. What are some of the things we need to consider? What are some of the things we need to consider? So what might skew these results? And when I say skew, I mean what might lead the results to be inaccurate? Anything you can think of? Oh, different cultures. Okay. Okay. So she did a survey of her math class. Okay. So is this a good representation of Canada as a whole? Well, you haven't talked to anybody outside of her math class. So not even in her city, right? Like not even a cross-section of people in her city. So yeah, it's a very localized group. Okay. And what were your exact words there? You're so far back, I can't even hear you. Why are you at the back of the class? Be up here, front. What did you say? Okay, your cultures, right. So if we're talking about one class, there is actually a good chance that it may be predominantly one people group, right? I mean, if you're in a small town, let's say, this is not a small town, but if you're in a small town, a lot of the people may be related or they may be of the same cultural group, right? And it may not be a lot of diversity there. So who knows? Vancouver, it could be, if 29 of the 30 students had brown eyes, it could be a specific cultural group in that class, right? So, right, I would say you're exactly right. And you guys can write this down. I'm not going to write it down, but you guys can write this down. And you said it, it probably isn't a good conclusion for the entirety of Canada because she only asked people in her class, and that small group, I mean, her class, only 30 students out of 30-some million, so that's not a good percentage, right? And they may be of the same cultural group, maybe not be a lot of diversity, and so on. Okay, very good. So just jot some of those notes down now if you haven't had a chance to do that yet. Okay, let's take a look at number 7 as well. You guys are still jotting down stuff for number 6, so you can go ahead and finish up that. I'll read through number 7 while you're finishing up. Elections for city mayor are being held. A polling company is conducting a telephone poll to predict the winner. The city has a population of 390,000. Of the 100 people called, 78 say they will vote for Ms. Kwan. Is it safe to say that Ms. Kwan will win the election? Explain your answer. So what are some things that pop to your mind here in this question? Logical, not logical, why? Anybody? Okay, not logical. What jumped out at you there?
Because 100 people is a small percentage of 390,000.
That's very true. 100 people is a very, very small percentage of 390,000, right? Point whatever percent. That's really small. Okay? So that's number 1. All right. Telephone poll, well, like I said, you're only getting people with a telephone, which is most people nowadays. That's granted. Some people have unlisted numbers, so you can't, they're right out. Depending on what time of the day you're calling, is it during the day when a lot of people are working, so it's unemployed people, or is it in the evening? I don't know. When are you calling? Are you getting a good cross-section of different, socioeconomic or cultural boundaries? Like, are you getting a good cross-section when you just pull a number out of the book? Maybe not, right? So there's some of these factors that are not being considered. All right, so that's a start for you. So finish number 8 there, and then 4.1 will be almost done, and you can start to practice your new skills here. Okay. So what I want you to do for the rest of this day is finish 7 and 8, and then work on and try and finish, lots of time, finish the practice your new skills. So there's number 1. Okay, so here's let me just make that bigger for you. There's number 2 and 3 and 4, 5 and 6. And then that should bring you to 4.2, okay? So you can finish these questions. You have the rest of the class. Try and have that all done.